Today we are learning how to hip hinge. The two common mistakes we tend to see are rounding at the spine instead of hinging at the hips, or performing a squat where the hips sink directly downwards and the spine stays upright instead of hinging forwards at the hips. Now you may have issues with your hips, hamstrings or spine that may be making it more challenging for you to perform a hip hinge, and you can choose to focus on these areas and fix those issues first. But in my opinion, the best thing to do first is learn how the hip hinge works and feels as a movement before addressing these other areas. So today we're performing 4 exercises that are going to help you properly perform a hinge. The first one, you're going to need a stick. So it could be a broomstick, a mop stick, whatever you can get your hands on. So we're going to use this stick to focus on 3 positions. We've got the position of the head, position of the mid-back, and the position of the coccyx. So with your stick in front of you, you're going to go thumb facing down and grab the stick, place it against the back of your head. The other hand's going to come round, and with the back of your hand, you're going to push it against the lower of your back into that coccyx position here. So we're already on 2 of the positions. I've got connection with my head and connection with my coccyx right down here, right at the top of the bum. Once you're here, we're going to make sure we've got that mid-back pushed against it. So we need to perform a posterior pelvic tilt where we're tilting those hips forward and flattening the back against that stick. So you should have all 3 connections on. So you've got head, mid-back and coccyx all touching the stick. Once you've got that position, your feet should be about shoulder width apart. From here, you're going to push the hips backwards and bring the head forwards whilst keeping all 3 points connected to the stick. So can you maintain all 3 points as you drive those hips backwards and bring those shoulders and head forwards? We should be engaging the core and almost engaging the core, so you're trying to push back into that stick, which will help you maintain that mid-back connection. Now exercise 2, we're going to need a weight plate. Preferably a good size one. So these bumper plates are all very similar size, so you can go for a 5 or a 10 like I've got here. I'm going to hold it behind me halfway down the plate, and it's going to be pushing against my bum here. So once you're in this position, you're going to straighten out the arms and keep the arms straight. That really helps when it comes to performing this exercise. And you're going to think about pushing your bum into that plate as if you're trying to close a door with your bum. So I'm trying to close that door by pushing my bum backwards, keeping my arms straight as I do so, and this kind of allows you to feel that movement where you're driving backwards with the hips. As you can see, I'm keeping the back flat, I'm hinging at the hips still, but this cue of pushing your bum back into that plate can really help you form that movement pattern so it becomes more natural over time. Exercise 3 and 4 are performing a hip hinge with a wall and without a wall. So really they're very similar, and we're going to go from 3 into 4 by slowly moving away from the wall. So this is going to serve as my wall here. You can start right up against it. Now if I try and perform a hip hinge here, the wall's going to instantly stop me because you should be driving your hips backwards and you're going to meet the wall here. Main thing is, that is happening, so by starting here I know that if my bum keeps touching the wall, then I am hinging at the hips because my bum is going into that wall. And all you need to do now is inch away from this wall like so. So tiny steps at a time, performing that same movement where I'm driving my hips back. As soon as I hit that wall, so I'm quite high in this hip hinge here, I'm going to come back up. I'm just going to keep performing that motion, driving the hips backwards whilst keeping the spine nice and straight. Once you feel comfortable at the distance you are from the wall, take another step out and try again. I'm barely touching the wall now before reaching my full depth of the hip hinge, and this is kind of where you want to get to, where you're having to really drive back. You should be keeping both feet flat on the floor and performing that full hip hinge by trying to touch that bum to the wall. The next step would be to take it away from the wall completely and performing this hip hinge with nothing behind you, but imagining you're trying to touch your bum to that wall as you were before. Like I have here, you can start to do this with no weights and just really focuses on the hip hinge itself. But then you can bring it back all the way to the wall, and you can use dumbbells, kettlebells, a barbell, or just your stick that you're using earlier to then perform the exercise all over again, as if you were holding a weight. So if you wanted to perform a deadlift, you'd start to mimic the deadlift motion with the weights, so that the weights don't throw you off and make you lose your hip hinge form when performing an actual exercise like the deadlift. Now, some of these exercises may really work for you and some of them might not. You may find that one of these exercises works really well for you, and that's okay. You only need one to work to really learn this hip hinge.